Hey everyone, and welcome to What is the Big Idea Week 1. So the idea of this short video is to kind of take some of the stuff that you learned from either the readings or from the videos or from the audio that we listen to, kind of take some of the stuff out. How do we tie it together? What are some of the main concepts that we want to make sure that we get out of it? So that's the whole idea of this. This came from a podcast that a guy named Daniel Pink did. You'll meet him a little bit later on in the semester when you'll watch one of his TED videos. But he had this podcast that he used to do that I really love the concept of it. It was called the 1-3-20 podcast. So it was one book, 3 key questions, tons of value in 20 minutes or less. So I really loved the way he put that together. I thought it was very concise, kind of what I'm trying to copy a little bit here. So yes, I'm stealing it completely from Daniel Pink, his idea. So the questions that he used to ask are, what's the big idea? Why do I care? And how do I put it into action? So we're really going to just take the first part of that, the what's the big idea of what we learned this week, and try to put it into a concise video. So it's something that, kind of make sure that we're reinforcing the concepts. So to really jump off, one of the things that we talked about that you read this week was, kind of what is leadership? So again, leadership's not a person. A leader is a person. Leadership's a process, and it's something that can be learned, and it's skills that can be developed, and that's what we're going to be looking to do this whole semester. I really love the example that they gave where it says a man runs down the street yelling, someone follows him, he's a charismatic leader. If no one follows him, he's a lunatic, right? So if you take that sentence and you think through what we learned this week, which was the leadership triangle, where there's a leader, follower, environment. If you take that guy and he's running down the street and people follow him, he's a charismatic leader. It really depends on that third part, right? The environment. So, as the time that we're practicing learning how to become leaders and thinking about our followers, thinking about our environment, putting it all together, that's what we have to think about, right? So as the leader, are we thinking about our followers? Are we thinking about it in the context of what's the environment that they're leading us in? And, do we have the right skill sets, and are we using the right skills within each different changing environments? So if you think about it, the one on the left is the triangle we just talked about. So in my job, we're on the leader. So there's me, Sean, at the top. I'm the leader. New England South, those are my followers. That's my team that's following me. And the environment's LifeVest sales. So as we're talking about it, this is one example. So you can put yourself in any one of those roles within the organization that you're at, but those roles can change, right? So if you look at the triangle on the top, again, there's me on the leader, New England South, and how the environment is with just LifeVest. But now, can that change a little bit? Absolutely. What if we're talking about the bigger organization and we step out of just the LifeVest division and we go into overall Zoll Medical? So I'm the leader there too. I'm the leader of the New England South LifeVest division. And sometimes, your directions can be a little bit different depending on what that looks like. Now, if you look at the bottom triangle, again, there's me as the leader, there's New England South within the medical devices. So that environment is a much different environment. And again, direction and the way I'm thinking about things are going to change based on each and every one of those different situations. So again, putting it into perspective again, as me as the leader, I can fall down into that followers, that part when I'm talking about, so Mike K, he's my leader. So he's the leader of the New England area. So he's the leader. I'm the follower, as well as me and all of my other managers, and then all of the other representatives and the sales support people that we have. We're all following Mike in his direction and guidance and his strategy based on him being the leader there. And again, it changes within the context of the environment that he's leading in. So is Mike leading just the Northeast? Is Mike the leader within Zoll? Is Mike the leader within medical devices? So just kind of giving some examples of how that can change a little bit. So it can change even a little bit more. So now take the people, my territory managers who were my followers, they're leading when it comes to LifeVest, that's the environment, or Zoll, that's the environment. When they're talking to the followers, who could be either a hospital or cardiologist, case manager, nurse within the hospital, when it deals with LifeVest or Zoll, because that's the environment that we're going to be leading in, right? So we're not going to. Our opinion, we would not be the leader if we were talking to somebody in a totally different division. They wouldn't, and they don't care about LifeVest and they don't care about Zoll. that environment, that doesn't give us any credibility as the leader. But when the hospital, the cardiologist has a patient that they want to put in a life vest, the person who needs to lead that process is my territory managers, right? So that's how that can change. And again, it can change within the paradigm of, if you look at it at the bottom, so that the purple triangle at the bottom, the ACC, that's the American College of Cardiology, they set up rules, guidelines, and things like that we follow as LifeVest, or again, within the much bigger medical device when it deals with cardiology. Again, they're the leaders when it deals with cardiology, is their environment. If it had another type of specialty, it wouldn't matter unless it had something to do with the heart. They wouldn't be seen as that leader. So again, a leader is only as good as the followers that follow them and the environment that they're within. So I set up two different pyramids here, and this is kind of how the hierarchy works through within a couple of different companies, right? And how a bigger company, so Merck on the right, there's me. I'm kind of way down at the bottom, just above my representatives out in the field, and there's Randy and Dave and Matt and Bob, Adam, Ken being the CEO. Ken would have no idea at all what is going on, even 2 levels below him. 3 levels before him, definitely not. All the way down to me or my individual representatives, nope. The same thing basically on the left, right? So Jason, he might have, he knows me, and we'll talk about that later in the year, where my interview is interviewing with all of them. Because it's a smaller company, he has a much more knowledge of what's going on in my area, but his direction isn't down to there, right? His direction, so Jason, as the CEO of the LifeVest division, he's looking at all the decisions that he's making are basically rolling downhill. So from Jason to Matt, who's the vice president of the US sales, so Bob Green, who's the Northeast, then Mike, who's my manager, then me, that's New England South, so just south of Boston, and then my representatives, so they're individual dirt. So that's the important way to think about it, is as you go up and down the chain, just what is this sphere of influence, right? So from the top down, understanding it. So again, I put this one here. When you look at it and you look at what that looks like within the organization, but again, that leadership follower environment is going to change based on where we're at. So Mike's guidance to me is based on the Northeast. Mine is based on New England South. Bob's is based on half of the United States. Matt's is based on all of the United States. Jason is based on the entire organization. And then we can get Zoll direction, which their leader, completely different environment, again, as the corporate entity. And then our parent company, which is Asani Kasai, which Zoll is just one little part of it. So again, as things flow, it's knowing where you are in the organization, and also who you're talking to, what the importance of where that's at. The other important part of it is the technical skill versus accountability and strategy, right? So if you take that same pyramid that we're just looking at, my TMs have the most technical skill of how our product works. They know it down to the screws, the bolts, exactly how to put it in, how to put it together, how to be able to talk about it to either patients or to doctors or to nurses. They have all that technical skill. As you go up the pyramid, that's less and less and less, right? So for example, I could talk to patients and doctors and understand it. Am I going to get into the technical specifics of that exact account as well as my territory managers would be? No way. Again, going up one level further, Mike is not going to be able to talk about what's going on in certain, exactly how to do something for a certain account, because he's not going to know it. He has so many that he's in charge of. I realize I'm using my company as the example for all of this, but I just think that it kind of puts it in perspective of how that leadership follower triangle changes depending on the environment. And again, as that technical skill goes up, the one on the right is accountability and strategy, right? So the accountability of my territory managers to the overall business of LifeVest is very small. It's just their little piece of dirt, and how their technical skills and how their accountability, their strategy is based on the dirt that they call on. Mine is a little bit bigger. Mike's is a little bit bigger than that. Bob's bigger than that. Matt, Jason, as you go up, it gets bigger. But the accountability and the strategy, that's why you see strategy come, from the top down. And again, this is giving that same perspective. of where the expertise needs to be in the technical aspect and where the strategy needs to be. But it also gives you that kind of that idea of, you know, where does that how does that information flow, and what's the important information that you're giving. I always like to talk about this is, where do micromanagers and toxic employees come from? It's not understanding this. It's not understanding the environment that they're in. So if you think about that, again, I don't think that Bob would be talking to my specific territory manager about what's going on Cape Cod. He might have a question on it, as Jason might, you know, if Jason was asking me what was going on in Westerly Hospital in you know, a little hospital in Rhode Island, that's really kind of getting down in the weeds to it. He might ask, hey, what are people saying? What's the opinion of this article at Mass General in Boston or within your area? What's the opinion that you're hearing on this particular subject? But if Jason was down working and trying to figure out the strategy for each one of my territory managers, that's where that micromanager comes from, right? So knowing where you are and knowing where you are in the organization, where your accountability and strategy should be. So going back to that original diagram that I was showing you, and so if you think about it, my philosophy is I give my territory managers the right to run their business, right? Because that's their job. And it wouldn't matter if we were doing this, if we were doing accounting, if we were doing, you know, if we were making widgets. Their specific job would be to have that technical expertise to do a certain thing. A job that I had before where I worked with Serta Mattress, you know, the CEO of that company is not going to know how to put all that mattress together to be exactly the way it is, but he's going to know what the components are so that he can do the cost analysis and he can do the advertising budgets and the things like that. But he's not going to know the individual things that make up that mattress. He's just going to know from the basics of, hey, this is what went into here. So again, the technical expertise would be different. If the CEO was down there saying, you know, I think we need to add this to that mattress, or we need to add that to that mattress, you know, that's not using his best technical skills. That's where they get in trouble. As well as when you have people who go up too high in the ranks and they only think about their specific territory. They're not thinking about, again, the person's role above it. So if one of my territory managers was going up to Bob and they were asking him lots of questions that were specific to their territory, Bob's not going to be able to give those answers, right? And that's where that toxicness can come from a little bit, is you know, just not understanding, and self-awareness is something that we'll talk about in the later weeks. But kind of that understanding of where you fit in and who and why sometimes there's levels and why you should talk to this person and that person, because it gives you that view. And again, as you move up in a leadership role, what your view should be. So my view to my representatives are about what's going on in our whole area, and what I'm hearing from the surrounding areas that I might hear from other people, my contemporaries, what's happening in Connecticut, what's happening north of Boston, what's happening in Albany. Those are the sort of things that I can bring that information back. Mike is doing that same thing, but in his level, where he's dealing with people at his level across the area. So again, the specifics and how it gets implemented into the specific territory, that comes from Mike to me to the TMs. That's why you see a good company will have a marketing strategy that will roll down the company and allow the leaders to be able to implement what they're asking them to do. So can a leader lead with different followers in a different environment? So, you know, sometimes you find these managers who have or leaders who have trouble when they go from, or, you know, one role to another. They can't, their skills don't transfer. And why is that? Again, it's probably because they're relying too much on their technical skills. So if you find yourself in one of those positions where it just doesn't feel like it's working, a lot of times it's because you're relying too much on the technical side of it and not the strategy side of it, or the accountability side of it, of holding somebody accountable for, hey, that report needs to be in, instead of having your hands into getting that report done, right? So it's really kind of thinking about it. So kind of different examples. When I first became a manager at Merck, you know, I was coming up from the ranks. I was working with a lot of my coworkers and friends beforehand. It was a very tenured team. It was 15 years plus. So the skills that I needed to use with them were, and again, the example I'll give is, you know, some scary downsizings. We had a number of downsizings when I was the manager there, and kind of leading these people through it, because now you're leading friends and coworkers who some are being displaced and they're losing their jobs. and other people who are keeping their jobs. And there was some different skills that you had to use with all that, but it was really keeping the waters calm and keeping the lights on and keeping the business going. And then the other thing that I learned was each person, you're managing them a little bit differently, right? So one of the first things I try to do when I'm coming onto a team is trying to figure out, is it skill or will that this person, if there's a discrepancy or somebody's not living up to their potential, is it a skill or is it a will? Is it a skill set that I can help them learn and help them get better at, or is it just their will? Is it them who they just don't want to do it? And again, going through the downsizing, a lot of times that was what we were doing. As I'm working with these people to get them through this. And sometimes it was the first time for them, sometimes it was many times for them, but it was, again, helping them to cope and go through that. Completely different when I came over to Zoll. When I was put into the leadership role there, I was new to the group. They knew nothing more than my LinkedIn profile and the resume they had found for me online. That's what they knew about it. They were not trusting of leadership. They had never made quota before. That's why I was here, and kind of changing that whole view and changing the whole way that they thought about things. It was a completely different environment. It was a really toxic, bad environment when I got here, and had to think through, how do we change that? And the things that I did at Merck didn't work here in some aspects. So I had to think that through. One of the things I used to do at Merck is on Monday mornings, I would write this thing called Monday Morning Motivation. Be a quote, and I would tie it to something going on in our business or something going on. Again, a lot about change with the downsizing and things like that. So help them work through it, trying to get my thoughts, understand that we're all in the same boat, thinking that sort of stuff. I tried that when I got to Zoll. I said, oh, I'll just copy and paste. I'll just do what I did there. It worked there. I'm going to bring it over here and I'm going to do it. Started doing it, fell flat. As a matter of fact, it was used against me by some of the toxic kind of employees that I had. So, and we'll get into toxic employees in a couple of weeks as we start reading. But it was kind of different. So I had to kind of think through a different way of doing things, but I had to hold it near to the way I like to be as a leader. So the authentic leadership in me. And again, we'll talk more about that as time goes on. But the key was, the way a leader can lead with different followers and even in a different environment is understanding, is it skill? Is it will? Is it, who's the leader? Who's the follower? What's the environment? What's different about this environment? Can I help people get through this? And can I transfer some things through it? So kind of those core beliefs that I had helped me go from one to another. So what can impact an environment and make a change outside of you just changing companies, right? And we read about this. It was globalization, innovation, technology, and an ever-changing political world. So, if you think about those changing environments that we have, in 2020, we're dealing with, a global pandemic, and how that, we had to change and think of the way that we do things, even within work. A lot more people remote working, a lot more people will continue to remote work once this is done. Also, kind of how information and medical changes and how do we share it from what's working here and what's not working there, and how do we kind of share that information? That's globalization. That's a perfect example of globalization, is what's going on with the pandemic. Innovation and technology changes. I always like to use the example of how we get information. So if you think about it, newspapers, right? So if you go back to the very origin of newspapers, they were done on a printing press. They were given out maybe once a week. Each one was individually done. Then we went to, mass producing of newspapers, and we went to a lot of newspapers that were done twice a day. Then we went to digital, either, getting our news from the television or from, online, where we were getting a lot of our information. I like to call it the CNN age, as they came on board and they changed it. Then we started we wanted information faster. So we were getting blogs, and people were posting stuff on Facebook and on the internet sites. We were getting our information much faster. Now we get them in tweets, right? So, a lot of these newspapers these reporters are waiting for the president to tweet something. And that's, can change the whole course of what the news cycle is. So, it's just kind of that innovation and technology. As technologies change and innovation, as we've got better, how things have changed. And then political worlds, kind of the Middle East and China, as they develop, in India, as they develop into bigger world leaders, How does that change? Because their cultures are different and their political structures are different. How does that change how we interact with them? So those are things that'll change the environment. And as emerging leaders, as leaders down the road, how does that affect with what you do? And then, we watched a couple of videos this week, and I really thought that they really hit on the environment. So if you think about Stanley McChrystal, the guy on the top, and how it changed on 9/11 when he jumped out of the plane to when he landed, and how the world had changed in that short period of time. Then how he dealt with some of those younger people on his team that knew technology even better than he did, how he had to rely and change his trust on them. And then how he dealt, if you remember, he was talking to one of his commanders and there was a firefight going on, and he was dealing with one of his commanders whose son was actually in that firefight. And in real time, how do you manage somebody who you know is distracted because of something else, a stressful situation going on? And then on the bottom is Binky from the second video that we watched. And, I think about him and the way that the Amazon was changing. He was put into a leadership role, not because he earned it, but because his father was the leader before him. But he changed a lot of the way he brought technology. He saw the world changing. He changed the environment for his followers because he felt that that's where they needed to be. So again, hopefully this was helpful, kind of tying some of the information together. There's a question at the bottom, to put in if there's something that you want me to go into a little bit more depth for next week. I'll make sure that I do it and as a follow-up. Okay, so hopefully everyone has a good week, and I look forward to seeing what you guys have.